For Matt, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's being a commissioner of an online league or being a record keeper. It's quite the thankless job. So I appreciate all the work you guys do.
Oh, well, we appreciate that too. I know you've done online leagues before, so you've seen some of the ways things work. I like to think that the BBA is a little more on the in control side than most, but we're all just a bunch of guys living regular lives too, so it's not like everything can go perfect all the time. Matt is a master.
It's unbelievable.
Um, Matt is amazing when you really get right down to it because yeah, he's like everyone else. There's times where he needs to step back and things get a little slow, but I mean he's been doing this for years and years and years, and it's just such a major part of who he is, and he's just fantastic at it. So never waste an opportunity to say thank you to Matt.
Absolutely, we're lucky.
Welcome to the GM's Corner, a Brewster baseball podcast where we put general managers on the hot seat and try to steal all of their very best secrets, which of course I will then keep all to myself so that I can win better. My name is Ron Collins. I am the general manager of the Yellow Springs 9, and today I am just totally over the moon to have Joe Lederer, the GM of the mighty Boise Spuds, with me here in the BBN studios. Thanks for taking your time here this afternoon, Joe. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
As anyone who has actually paid attention on the forum knows, we've done this one other time before, and I actually managed to capture 13 seconds of semi-audio. Hopefully I will exceed my expectations here and we'll get rolling. I'll kick off with the same questions that I asked the very first time that we were together, and because nobody else heard the answers and they're important for us. You live in Long Beach. You said you've lived there for your whole life. Talk to me about your time there and your family and just how you think about it.
Yeah, born and raised in Long Beach. Probably spent a good probably 75% of my time in Long Beach. It's all been Southern California. School in Santa Barbara, lived in San Diego for work for several years, but it all brought me back to Long Beach. My parents are both born and bred in Long Beach as well, and the whole family. I have a ton of uncles, aunts, cousins that live in Long Beach or the communities close to it. So there's a big group of us down here.
There you go. Kind of the Lederer Central.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I've got a brother in Long Beach that I try to get out to every year or so. If I get an opportunity, I'll give you a yell and maybe we can have lunch or something together. That'd be fun.
Absolutely.
Social media manager, that's part of your application. How did you come about becoming a social media manager, and what does that mean to you? What do you actually do?
Well, my entire career has, for the most part, been in the golf industry. In addition to being huge baseball fans, the Lederers are big golfers. Most of us recreationally. I did have a cousin who played professionally on the web.com tour, but I took to golf at an early age after stopping playing baseball in Pony League. Played golf in high school. And, I've worked in the industry, started out as a general manager of a golf course in Long Beach, became a director of operations of a golf course in San Diego. I've also done sales for golf equipment. And as of most recently, I'm the social media manager for a men's lifestyle apparel brand based in Huntington Beach, California. And that brand has its roots in golf. So through connections, I landed the job with that brand. And my day-to-day is I oversee all the social media platforms for the brand: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And then I'm also the copywriter for the company. Anything that's written, it's coming from me. Press releases, product descriptions, anything you would read in an email on the catalog. My background is in English, so I love writing.
I would never have guessed that.
So it's why I came to the Brewster. So it's great. I'm not the biggest fan of social media itself. It has its ups and downs, but I love the job and the ability to be creative.
If you look at the advantages of social media and not the darker the darker side of the social part of social media.
Exactly.
Um, I mean, the things that can be accomplished today between people is just incredible when you come right down to it. I mean, at the end of the day, the Brewster is a big social media place,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
When you think about it. So anyway, enough of that. Let's talk about the Boise Spuds. What were your thoughts when you first got contacted? I assume Matt was the one to probably reach out and ask you if you would take over the Boise Spuds. What were your thoughts?
He was, and I was thrilled. I joined the Brewster, knowing about the Amoeba and how it was kind of training grounds for new GMs, and totally anticipated spending a season or two at least until there was an opening. I knew there was going to be expansion on the horizon, so I knew there was a good possibility within a couple seasons I'd be able to get my crack. But within about 2 weeks of real life time, the opening became available for Boise. Matt reached out and asked, and I was thrilled. I would have taken any club that was offered to me. The fact that it's one of the recent expansion teams had a lot of appeal. A fact that it hasn't done well in its infancy also appealed to me. I love problem solving and reclamation projects when it comes to OTP. So it was really the perfect fit, and I didn't hesitate. I jumped at it.
So explain to me how you felt like the first hour as you're looking through your team. What kinds of things were you looking for? I know you're a pretty experienced out of the park person, so I'm interested in hearing you talk a little bit about how you examined your team and analyzed it and began to actually develop whatever the Joe Lederer scheme is going to be.
Yeah, so any general manager is going to have their nuances and their plans of how to operate a team and what kind of players they look for, and just different styles. And for the most part, whatever team you take over, whether it's an online league or it's the one player version, you're going to inherit a team or take over a team or start brand new. And you're going to want to shape that team to work with your tendencies. So I like pitching and defense. I like, I had kind of a sabermetric background and trying to find market inefficiencies and all that jazz. So that was the first thing I was looking for, just to see if that was an opportunity. Being a not so great club, there were a lot of holes. And so the fun thing was the challenge of how am I going to make these things work? And, I saw some opportunities to, have a rebuild of some sort or kind of start new with a younger club. But then there's always, you open the team and you see Dennis French is always a nice addition to have on any club, no matter whether you're a seasoned veteran or a young guy starting
Well, let
out.
me give you a special insider clue. Dennis French is probably not going to be very good, so I would be willing to give you, a couple of guys for him just as a welcoming gift.
Yeah, you're probably the sixth GM in the league to reach out and warn me that French is probably not going to be worth my time, and if they would take him off my hands.
Well, we're a welcoming group like that.
Yes.
So you sit down, you kind of look through your team, you're looking for pitching and defense. You're right at the beginning, essentially, of an off season, right? I mean, you had a couple of different cycles on free agency. We actually talked on the forum about your big signing of Egbert Boehner. Boehner? How do you pronounce that? Boehner, I guess. That's how I pronounce it.
Yeah, that worked.
What were your thoughts when it came to looking at the free agent pool? Obviously, you decided to throw a lot of cash into it. Tell me about what you're thinking there.
Yeah, one of the things Matt did mention when he said Boise was going to be made available if I wanted it was that it had the most money to spend. I guess over the first 4 years, it's been generally at or near the bottom of player payroll. And so I had a lot to work with. Didn't necessarily mean I was going to spend it. But looking at the free agent class and seeing the holes on the current roster, I thought there were a couple different players that would make sense. But I wanted to stay flexible as this is a growing team. I didn't want to throw money around for long term. And so I actually stuck to my guns and made some initial offers for 2 to 4 years, probably definitely at overvalue for the market. But knowing that I had a lot of flexibility in pay room roll, I was willing to overpay per year if I could get it to on my terms. And it just so happened everything worked out with Boehner and with Salazar as well, which was a kind of last minute addition.
Yeah, I was actually surprised and personally pleased at the Salazar signing. Just first off, I thought it was a well done contract from an aesthetic standpoint. I'm assuming that in your shoes you'd like to have got him for a little cheaper than that, but obviously I liked it because it brought me a draft pick for the second round next cycle. So that was happy for me.
More than happy to help you out there.
There you go. When you look at free agency in general, and you talked about having a lot of cash, if you've listened to all of our different GMs corners and conversations that we've had on podcasts, and read stuff, you'll know that Ted and I and Randy and Brett Schroeder, the Amoeba's Brett Schroeder, at various different times have spent a lot of time talking about developing contract structures, right? And how much of your budget should you spend when you're coming up the curves and different things like that. What kinds of thoughts were going through your heads kind of structurally in that sense from an out-of-the-park team in a salary cap league? Looking at Boise and where you're at, where did you actually kind of plan here's where I want my final payroll to be, if in an ideal situation, or were you just kind of winging it, or where were your thoughts on that?
I guess I was kind of winging it, just knowing that, the offers that I initially made weren't probably going to be the final contract details. So I left myself some leeway. I think I'm currently at $89 million. I have a budget over the cap, so I do still have some money to work with. At the end of the day, if I was able to sign some players, that'd be great. And if that was the case, I still wanted to have a little bit of flexibility, whether it was a trade mid-season. I'd hate to be, backed into a corner when it comes to payroll, especially when it's a salary cap league, and you can be hamstrung with bad contracts or bad financial situations. So I did want to leave myself a little bit of room. And like I said before, I didn't want to go over a certain amount of years. I have some salary coming off the books in the next 2 or 3 years. So with those existing players and these new signings, I'll have a lot of money to pay both French and Tirada, who are going to be going through the arbitration process. And if I want to extend them, throughout those years, it's going to be important to have that flexibility.
I want to say that Brett was the first person that I heard actually say this, but it could have been Ted, it could have been any others, that there's almost no such thing as a super bad 1-year contract.
Sure.
Right. In a salary cap league in particular, where you've got some weird inefficiencies going on, sometimes it's better to go ahead and spend. Boise has often had their payroll in the 30 and 40 million range when their budget is 80 or 90 or 100, right?
Right.
And for me personally, I look at that and I think of it as a pretty big inefficiency, because really the big goal here, I think, is to drive revenue, right? So at least the way I tend to think about things is,
yeah,
I want to create revenue. I almost don't care what I spend, and I don't care if I lose money in a single year, but I want to keep my revenue building over time. And so when I look at something like Boise, Jeff is a fantastic general manager for lots of ways, but that's the one thing that I would look at what Boise was doing, and I'd go, wow, that's like $50 million he's leaving on the table that he could win an extra 10 games with or 5 games with and build revenue. But his teams have won as he's gone through it, and Boise has come up the curve pretty well. I'm very excited to see where you're going to go with them. I think that's an extremely interesting team to work with. But yeah, I loved the Boehner signing, in the sense that 1 year is definitely, in the first year, $27 million is an overpay. Anytime you give anybody $27 million, you're not going to get $27 million worth of stuff. Exactly. But if you've got the money in your pile, what else are you going to do with it except admire it, I guess?
Yeah, and I've seen in OTP, I don't know if it's over a 1 season stretch, but over the course of 3 or 4 seasons, if you're consistently well below your owner's budget, and perhaps fan interest is waning, the owner will at times drop that budget. And if I was just sitting with a sack full of money for the next 2 seasons, the owner could have then said, "Okay, your budget's going to be $70 million," and I would have been really screwed trying to rebuild this. So I don't love throwing around money, but if you have it and it doesn't hurt the franchise, why not spend it?
There you go. Let me go ahead and put you into the traditional lightning round hot seat. Right, I'm going to put you in the corner. I'm going to shine the really bright lights in your eyes and see if I can dazzle you.
I'm sweating already.
What is your biggest signing of this off season?
I'm going to say it's definitely Boehner. I had a huge hole in pitching, so to get a guy who routinely puts 200 innings and a handful of WAR is great. I got a big boost of fan interest with his signing as well. So, it was the big ticket purchase of the offseason, but it was also the most important and significant as far as, producing on the field.
What's the biggest signing not from Boise?
Oh, wow. It's been, this is my first season in OTP, and to see a lot of these, I don't know if superstar is the right word. There were some really, really talented players, maybe not franchise players, but some really, really good, talented hitters and pitchers. And to see them up to this point, which is the middle of spring training, still on the, waiting to get signed, I thought was really interesting. As far as most interesting signing, I think I can't remember the player's name, but a catcher just got picked up, I thought, for a really good price. I wish I knew the name, but it was a guy I was kind of looking at potentially if one of these moves didn't go through. I thought it was a smart deal. But yeah, it's just kind of looking at the landscape of the league and understanding the tendencies of these different GMs is interesting.
Let me ask you one that you've already heard before, but people have got to hear this. Right?
Okay.
When I looked at your application, right, I was looking at cooking and sabermetrics and publishing of novellas and unpublished novellas, and I'm going, yes, but talk to me about horology. How did that come about? What in the world are you talking about?
So horology is technically it's the study of time, but I'm not pulling up doctrines from the Renaissance period talking about the earth moving or anything like that. Really, it's the appreciation of watches and timepieces. I love watches. They're works of art, I feel. You can wear. There's cool little intricacies and mechanisms with them. I'm not a big budget guy, but I do have a small collection of over 10 vintage Seiko watches from the 70s, which are all different in their own way. So it's kind of a nerdy thing, but I love watches.
Outstanding. I had to ask that. And since I lost the entire conversation, I had to ask it again.
Absolutely.
4-man rotation, 5-man rotation. What kind of guy are you?
You left off 6-man rotation.
6-man rotation. Go for it.
Again, pitching is not a strength. We did improve with Boehner, but I may work with something out of the box, be it a 4-man rotation. With a pitch count, so the guys can make their next start with being too fatigued, and going with a deep bullpen, or going with a 6-man rotation and trying to let these guys go as deep as possible and see if I can kind of pick up some wins that way. Studying the forum, I came across the Cyclone method. That I believe Alan has named, and I think that's going to be something I'm going to be looking to emulate this upcoming season with the talent that I have.
I'm guessing that we're going to actually launch it for this year using the openers. Matt hasn't actually announced or decided fully yet, but we've talked about it a little bit. I'm certain we will use it sometime soon, so I'm looking forward to seeing how guys like Alan and the more creative folks end up using the opener feature inside OOTP and how it actually works. I actually admit I have not tested it, so I don't know what it. There's going to be lots of things to mess with this year with version 20 coming out, and lots of tweaks and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, I think when that becomes available, that's going to be something that I'm going to look at for sure. I think a lot of the GMs in the league will do the same. The thing I don't envy for you and the governing board is figuring out when a opener or follower hits free agency what their classification is for compensation. I don't think Major League Baseball has really figured that out yet. So it'll be interesting to see what we do from a financial standpoint.
Well, I think Major League Baseball is going to be changing it so for the next few years anyway before it's all said and done. So I think Out of the Park has lots of oh, geez, what was the latest thing that I saw? There was a conversation on the Out of the Park boards about the Rays looking at splitting their home city, right? Half of their year in Montreal, half of their year in Tampa, and that's being discussed. So Out of the Park is going to have to think about what it means to have potentially a team in two cities.
I can't think of a worse idea for them.
It seems like an odd thing, but they're not drawn in Tampa, so what can you say? Best thing and worst thing about or I shouldn't say worst thing, best thing and most confusing thing about the Brewster Baseball Association so far. You're a brand new, still count as a brand new person. So while the idea is still fresh in your head, talk to me about the best thing and the most confusing thing that you've run into.
I mean, the best thing is the draw that brought me to the Brewster is being creative on the forums, creating all the articles, the team previews, being able to kind of create this fictional world and having 30 other, or I should say, there's 38 of us with the Amoeba, having everyone really bought in on that. It's so entertaining and fun to log into the forum, see that there's all these new articles and going through them all and reading them. And everyone is a different writer and has their own different style. It's great. And, God forbid Boise is horrible, but I could win 65 games a year and I'd still have a blast being able to read all these articles and then write them as well. The most confusing thing is, the online leagues that I've done, I really just focused on the talent aspect, the players and acquisitions and setting lineups. The financial aspect of Brewster is going to be a little bit of a learning curve, whether it's how cash flow works with stadium maintenance and those kind of things. Those are kind of all new to me. Typically I let my assistant GM set my scouting budgets and my ticket prices, but I know there are dozens of articles talking about, what's the right level of, when is the ticket price too low or too high? So these are things that I'm going to have to really consider to take advantage of because it seems like these are factors that do make a difference in some way.
Yeah, no, that's a good answer. And quite honestly, the financial structure of the league is, if you ever think that you actually understand exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it, then you're probably giving yourself too much credit.
For sure.
So anyway,
I've heard call OOTP. It's not just a baseball simulation, but it's a financial simulation.
Yeah, that's kind of one of my catchphrases, and that actually, I can't remember whether I came up with it or whether it came out of an old league that I was in with Stephen Shaw, the old Fable back in the probably 2003 range. We used to call, instead of calling it Out of the Park, we used to call it the FAC, the fancy ass calculator.
Oh, I love that.
And we actually did all of our finances outside the game, and it was definitely a big financial sim. So I think you need to understand how the finances work in order to really have a good long running operation. You can screw your finances up for a year or two and still win, but if you've got screwed up finances, it's not going to last real long. So.
Right.
Alrighty, last question of the hot seat. Let me adjust the bright light here.
Oh boy.
When Boise wins the Landis, what are you going to celebrate with?
Oh my goodness. I could go the traditional route of champagne or ice cold beer. Something not too classy. A Schlitz. Something like that.
Be
Being
still my heart.
being a fantasy baseball player, I know the tradition of Yoo-hoo back in the rotisserie days.
Yes, indeed.
Does have its appeal, and then being Boise and the home of the potatoes, maybe we'll order a case or two of some Vodak and drink that.
All righty. Well, you have survived the lightning round, so congratulations.
Whew, I'm wiping my brow right now.
It is traditional that if you have anything you would like to ask me, I know we talked about some things before, but if you have anything else you'd like to chat about or bring up, I'll be happy to pontificate and pretend like I know what I'm talking about.
Fair enough. I'll take you up on that. It's a repeat question, but I think it should be asked again because we do have even more new GMs since we last spoke. But if there's a storyline, whether it's in the game or outside of the game, that runs through the Brewster that every new GM should explore and find out about, and Al Hoot doesn't count as an answer, what would it be?
Well, my answer to you last time, and it still counts. I saw you went and did it, so I'll mention it again. Is go search Dan Fiskus. The whole storyline of Chris Wilson turning the operation of his team over to his assistant general manager for a year was just absolutely brilliant. Brilliant writing, great storytelling around it, and it still has reverberations today. I will add more and say. In my mind, when I was first coming in, I created a bit of a rivalry with Louisville and Stu, the genius. If you can go and do some searching on what the kinds of things he was writing in the 2024 through 2028, 2030 period, I mean, he's got his whole family of, I mean, the Louisville / Wichita general management function is a Banana Republic mafia, right? Before it's all said and done, and nobody writes that any better than Stu. So I'm waiting with bated breath for him to recatch his get his breath back and get his life together. I shouldn't say life together. I don't know if he's having any issues, but I'm waiting for him to get on another creative spree like that, because some of those conversations about his trips to South America to find international free agents and so forth, just I absolutely adored those. So that's what I would say. Dan Fiskus, and go search for some of what Stu was doing in those time periods. Go look at the Louisville team news threads in that kind of time period, and you'll just see all sorts of fun stuff.
Oh, I can't wait. That is great. You've been involved as a beta tester for OOTP for quite a while. Is there a change or an improvement that you'd like to see in OOTP in future versions?
Yeah, I think that Ted and I have talked several times. I can't remember. I think you asked this question before, and I can't remember how I answered it. But Ted and I have talked several times about the idea of individual pitches. Right now we have individual pitches, and they're each given a single rating, and they all kind of mush together into some other things. I just think that it needs to be way better than that. I think that each pitch needs to be rated for its own velocity and its own movement, and there needs to be a command function in here somehow. And I think command actually touches on all the pitches, and maybe there's at one point I actually wrote up a series of design documents for Marcus on how this would work. And wow. I sent it to him, and I just think that it kind of overwhelmed him at the time. That's my take on it. He didn't want to do that kind of surgery into his system, right? Because those are some pretty big changes, but those are the kinds of changes that need to happen for the game to move out of the by plate appearance kind of resolution into using some of the more modern day analytics, right? I mean, we don't talk about pitchers' movement, we talk about their spin rate, right? We talk about location and spin rate and velocity as far as that goes. And so those are the kinds of things that I think need to happen there. I also think an even bigger piece that gets into ratings and and I know Ted pulls his hair out on this quite a bit on the big picture rating schemes and trying to figure out relative ratings and whatnot. Things are going to really be kind of hamstrung until Marcus and crew go the next step and, in my opinion, separate out the whole scouting algorithm from the rating and development algorithm. We need to go deeper into things like power is not power, right? Power is bat speed and launch angle and strength and whatever. And but the problem with that is, and I think we had a conversation on the forum about it, is that as soon as you do that as out of the park, then all these historical simmers who love having Mickey Mantle face Cy Young are going to be in trouble because nobody knows what spin rate Cy Young threw his slurve at, right?
Right.
I mean, so in order to get that right, you'd have to backward engineer all sorts of stuff. So it's what I'm asking for, and the things that, in my opinion, need to happen are not simple changes that can be done in a month's worth of time, right? That it needs a kind of a redesign thing. But those are things that I think are the most impactful things, and they reverberate through everything that is out of the park before it's all said and done.
Yeah, those would be great. That'd be exciting if they get to that point.
Well, the important thing about it, and why I do a lot of the stuff that I do, is I want to try to figure out what parts of the game I can use baseball logic and be right.
Mm-hmm.
In the places of the game where baseball logic doesn't actually work, or at least it doesn't work in the way that you think it ought to work, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
And Ted and I have lots of these conversations, and I feel quite a simpatico aspect with Ted, because in that time period when I was doing, for example, the individual pitches, I actually stepped away from out of the park for a year or two after that because it pissed me off so much that they wouldn't do it, right? Because this is the way the game needs to be.
Right.
Right. That was kind of my mindset. So I actually left the Fable at that time and kind of took about a year and a half away and cleared myself. And that's when I ended up going to the PIBA back and writing the couple of different PIBA books that I wrote, right? Because at that stage I was ready to play the game again and not get so tied up into the fact that Marcus was not listening to my pet way of doing things. Right. I wanted Marcus to bet his company on my opinion, and that was probably not healthy for me or Marcus at that time.
Last question for you. You brought up the PIBA league, the PIBA Diaries. Are we going to see more Casey Neal, and could he have a role to play in the Brewster?
Yeah, you've got, like I said last time, you got me thinking about that. I really hadn't thought. I've been trying to think about how to write a book around the BBA for quite a while. And I really hadn't come up with something that worked because I didn't want to do the same thing that I did with the first PIBA book, right? Because what I wrote, I think when we talked before, I wrote the first PIBA book in between their sims. I wasn't part of their league yet, and I wanted them to accept me in the league. And so the idea there was, the conceit there was, is that Casey and his friend Dono were going on the road trip, and every time they would have a sim, I would go to I would determine based on the schedule, where Casey and Dono had to go in order to get to their next games. And so I would pick the locations of each chapter based on a stadium and a city that was in the PIBA. And I couldn't come up with a conceit to make that happen. But then when we were talking before, you actually asked about it, and I've latched onto the idea that the second book actually has essentially this big quantum thing going on where technically I could make Casey and or Dono. Who knows who Dono really is, what Dono really is, but I could see Casey Neal showing up in the BBA, so I'm thinking about how that would work. For those who have not read the books, Casey Neal ends up being kind of a sports journalist, more of a telling life stories kind of journalist in that sense, I think, than a following the games individually. So certainly there's something there that could happen, and if I look at the timing, the years that he was writing in the PIBA, he could be doing a Hunter S. Thompson thing out there for 15 years and show up in the BPA. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I'm thinking about it quite a bit. I loved writing those books because I could just sit down and crank them out. I could just let the world flow in my head. And if you've read those books, you know that they can be, for me, deliciously meandering. I don't know whether people who read them find them to be deliciously meandering or not, but I loved doing them.
Fear and Loathing in Yellow Springs. That could be what's.
There you go.
Well,
that's called Louisville's Nightmare.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that's all I have for you today, Ron.
All righty. Well, I certainly appreciate your time, and we'll look forward to having you sit down again and do another GM's Corner or have a conversation about some other stuff. That'd be fun.
Absolutely, and I'll see you in the Frick.
The Brewster Baseball Association is an out-of-the-park baseball league commissionered by Mr. America himself, Matt Rechtenwald, and competed in by an amazing group of outstanding general managers. Check us out at montybrewster.net. You have been listening to the GM's Corner, a podcast where we put BBA GMs on the hot seat. Music is Cool Piano by Tigerius and is used under Creative Commons Attribution License. See you next time. Until then, have fun, be safe, and always remember that even a boring team news is worth 2 points.